It's Australia. In 1994, in order to modernise and show down their arch-rival, Holden, Ford Australia decided they needed something to finally beat the VT, VR, and VS Commodores, which were beating Ford's Falcon at both the dealers and the track. Now, for anyone not from Australia watching, more specifically the Americans, no, the Australian Falcon and the American one are not the same thing. Unlike Ford of America, Ford of Australia actually kept the nameplate around, and at this point, said nameplate was in trouble. Holden was beginning to eke out a noticeable lead, and Ford needed something to clap back. They needed something modern, new, futuristic, to blow the Commodore completely out of the water. Instead, they made the AU Falcon. Now, whilst mechanically it was superior to the Commodores of the time, and honestly even some of the later generations, that styling, it just completely shot Ford square in the foot. Now, me personally, I don't think the AU is quite as ugly as everyone says it is. I mean, from the front and the side, I don't mind it. That fucking rear, though. And the interior, don't even... Anyway, faced with a complete failure on their hands, Ford released a couple of new versions of the AU to soften the blow, whilst they worked on something new. Something that would, actually, this time, change their fortunes. And so, in September of 2002, they unveiled the BA Falcon. With stunning new looks, it immediately righted the wrongs of the AU's little bit sad face and very, very sad ass, and tightened all of its weird curves into sleek, straight lines, immediately making, in my opinion here, the BA one of the most gorgeous looking cars ever made down under, and an absolute Australian icon, before people even had a chance to look under the hood. Now, to its credit, whilst Ford's Intech Straight 6 had been a pretty bloody good engine in its own right, Ford did finally perfect the inline-six formula with the Barra, the without question most legendary engine ever manufactured down under. It's pretty much the Australian 2JZ, except over here it's considerably cheaper, damn near bulletproof, quite fat, and makes ridiculous amounts of power. Okay, look, I get it. You're getting annoyed because you clicked on a video about DREDD, and instead I've rambled about cars that were only sold in one country during one time period for one specific market in one body style. But there's a point to it. The BA and subsequent B series of Falcons are Australian legends, but the story behind them is the main thing. The story of a complete failure, a terrible outer shell but decent insides, being refined into something effective, efficient, stylish, and brilliant. The story of a grander product being produced through more restraint. And the Falcon is not the only time such a thing has gone down, no. That story is repeated damn near exactly in the Judge Dredd movies. Now I just quickly want to preface this here. If you like the 1995 Judge Dredd movie, this video is in no way a hit piece on it. Like, you can like whatever you want to like, I'm not going to take any issue with that, and I'm really in no position, as just some guy, to be taking pot shots at an actual genuine Hollywood movie. The only reason why I'm making this is so that I can learn more about filmmaking myself, so I can make myself better films. And just here, for simplicity's sake, whenever I mention anything to do with 1995, that's for the 1995 Judge Dredd movie. Whenever I say anything to do with 2012, that's for the 2012 Judge Dredd movie, because I say a lot of random shit, the interchanges for that in this. And so, without further ado, let's get to talking about the AU Falcon of this franchise. Alright, now, to start this section, I'm going to start off by being positive and joyous and whimsical. I'm going to talk about the things I actually like about the 1995 movie, and I think are really well done. A lot of it comes down to the visual style, like the set design, the prop design, the costumes, minus Sylvester Stallone's face, we're going to come back to that one. Just absolutely everything to do with all of the visuals in this movie is so technically well done and incredible. It's honestly amazing. Even the sound design is real. It's not just competent, it's real. It's like actually I don't know, decent? I wasn't expecting it from a movie with, the obvious sound quality that they're going to have in the 90s, but it was surprisingly nicely well done. And when it comes to the actual world itself, there's a really good video by Patrick H. Willems about the insane megacities of 90s cinema, which does touch on Judge Dredd, 1995. And whilst I do disagree with his stance on Megacity 1 in Mr. 2012, he is absolutely right when he says the Megacity 1 in Mr. 1995 is absolutely gorgeous. It is stunning. It's so incredibly well done. Just absolutely everything about this movie, even stuff like, I don't know, the ABC Warrior, is really, really just on point. Even if, narratively speaking, it only gets used to, artificially put characters into situations and fix problems that the writers created that they didn't want to fix themselves. But we're gonna address that now. So, when it comes to the things that I don't like about the movie, that's pretty much everything to do with the writing and directing department. Broadly speaking, the plot of the entire movie doesn't really unfold in a natural way, and it's very artificial and just kind of put in place. It doesn't really seem like the characters are operating on their own free will and just kind of doing whatever needs to be done to get to the next specific plot point without really adhering to their goals. It does really, as much as the world design, fucking crazy level of immersion, the writing just yanks you right back out of it. And there are other things about the script, not just that make you break immersion, it's also that the script only kind of takes itself half seriously at times. It's really odd. The 1995 movie seems decidedly confused. It can't seem to make up its mind on whether or not it's a gritty cyberpunk thriller like its forebears like Blade Runner, or, an action thriller like its successor, 2012, or if it's just a fucking buddy cop movie. And you know what? Trying to juggle all three of those things at once kind of doesn't work. Especially with the caliber of filmmaking that we're dealing with here. Personally, I think a good example of this is, at the start of the movie, they have this place called Heavenly Haven, and it's ooh, it's meant to be cool, it's meant to be heavenly, and then it reveals, and it's not fucking heavenly at all. Personally, I do think this could have been well executed. They could have done it well. They didn't. It just feels cheap and like a really easy way of leveraging that, ooh, this setting is bad, but it feels more like they're telling us rather than showing, which I know sounds weird because it is technically showing, not telling, but it feels like it. And, the whole outrage that the people of the block have after they find out that the park is getting scrapped and then it escalates into a block war, it just feels like they're trying too hard to leverage it without doing it naturally, because people surely would be used to shit like this if they've been living in this dystopia for this long. That just seems like that would be a given. Now, of course, this is just the start of the movie that I'm talking about, but these problems persist throughout the entire thing. And another thing that I just need to address is, the movie treats Dredd like he's this just coolest guy ever, absolute badass, he's so amazing, which, yeah, he absolutely is, but the way the movie does it, it doesn't feel particularly earnest. It feels like they're trying too hard to hype him up to be just absolutely crazy, and it's pushing this narrative where it's more, again, it's very much, they are technically showing us, but it feels more like they're telling. The thing with Dredd is this kind of character where he kicks bubblegum and chews ass, but the thing is, we need to be shown that. And when you just have every other character in the movie fucking sucking him off, it just comes off as cheesy, and it honestly doesn't really work. I think the characterization here doesn't really work, because I see Dredd as more of this unstoppable, unthinking kind of killing machine character. So think more Doomslayer than Duke Nukem. This is the symptom of a broader problem with the movie, where it, as I said before, just refuses to take itself seriously, which it kind of needs to. Because at the end of the day, Dredd as its source material is, again, a very gritty, fucking cyberpunk action series, and when you're just playing it off like this, and just making it fucking goofy and silly and over the top, and then you put a fucking comic relief character in it just feels like it's at odds with the visual design trying to leverage this as this oppressive, scary cyberpunk dystopia and really expanding the world, but the story itself, the writing, doesn't actually do anything to leverage that. Now, by any means, this does not mean that DREDD 1995 is a bad movie. It's average. It's a Sylvester Stallone movie, and that's probably part of why it ended up like this. Behind the scenes, Stallone's meddling is probably why it turned out the way that it is, because he's quoted after the fact of making it, saying that he wanted to push it into more of a campy, again, that buddy cop kind of style there, and it really didn't work when he had to bounce off of the film's director, Danny Cannon, who is a man of, shall we say, interesting character, which led to there being a lot of creative disputes with the movie, and just causing it to be bloated completely beyond proportion. Not to mention, the budget for this movie was bang on double what DREDD 2012 was, meaning that there were probably a fair few people on the payroll of this movie who didn't need to be there. This evident back and forth and turmoil and just absolute creative clusterfuck that was going on behind this movie and its writing ended up really shooting it in the foot, and it never really managed to achieve what made its source material quite so cool. Comparatively, it would be like if Michael Radford had Julia in 1984's film adaptation constantly make witty puns about Maggie Thatcher the Milk Snatcher, which I think we can all agree wouldn't work, not just because it's a bad analogy, but also just because it wouldn't work. At the end of the day, DREDD 1995 is an average movie. Sure, its visual design and its world and everything is done so incredibly amazingly well, but the writing, well, it just drops the ball like an Olympic athlete pegging a lump of tungsten into the Grand Canyon. And so, here we are. We're at the point of the story where the metaphorical VT Commodore has outsold the... You know what, fuck it. DREDD 1995 has come out to a complete critical disappointment, which I don't think is entirely warranted. And even though it did technically break even, its producers considered it financially to be a disaster. But luckily, the mistakes that DREDD 1995 made were clear and obvious. Mistakes that are easy to read and easy to rectify. So Alex Garland, the new producer for a potential new adaptation, and his chosen director, Pete Travis, got their hands on the rights to make DREDD 2012, they knew exactly what to learn from. Like the AU's looks being chucked out, the big bombastic action style was one of the first things to go, and in came the sleek lines of Carl Urban, and along with the big, huge, futuristic vision, just slimming things down, making them focused, and getting exactly to the core of what exactly they were making. An intention to distill the film down to its core elements, like getting rid of the AU's huge mess of trim specs, and just getting down to exactly what it was that this film was going to be about. Like how the BA became a more modern and effective car by being more like what a Falcon really was, DREDD 2012 decided to really just hone in on what DREDD as a franchise is. And so, Mr. Garland and Mr. Travis set about making one of the most underrated action movies of the 2010s. Now, before it seems like I'm sucking this movie off a little too hard, DREDD 2012 does have its issues, which I'm going to address. Now, Mega City 1 in DREDD 2012, yeah, it definitely does have less character than in 1995. It's a petty thing, because at the end of the day, I do think it works better than 1995's Mega City, purely because it is more grounded and more gritty, which matches the tone and the general style of DREDD 2012 a lot better, and because it functions better within the entire whole, with context added, I do think it's better because, again, without the context, yeah, 1995
it's a better setting. You know what? It's still cool. Like, I still like how it looks, I still like that it's very oppressive and dope, even if it does, you know, have less personality. And there you go, that's my notable issues. Pretty much everything else in this film either works or is really well done, so it's kind of difficult to comment on things without nitpicking and just taking out tiny little, ooh, this particular line could have been better, that kind of shit. Which, you know what, I'm not going to do. Similar to the B-Series Falcon, it is pretty bulletproof, and look, you know what, this is probably the part of the video where I should admit my complete and total lack of bias. Obviously, you know, I was paid by the movie and that. Okay, look. The gritty atmosphere, the satisfying hyper-violence, the absolutely gorgeous slow-mo sequences, and the very tight-knit and lean story just absolutely kills it. Sure, it's not as grand of scale or as crazy as DREDD 1995, but you know what? It doesn't really need to be. And, you know, it's not that kind of amazing, big, out-there movie that's going to change your life, but DREDD 2012 just has that simple satisfaction of, well, a simple job just really well done. Because DREDD 2012 didn't have the creative disputes, and, you know, a smaller budget, Garland was able, and forced really, to zero in exactly on what Judge Dredd was and what he wanted to make. They pulled back most of the crazy set pieces, and by setting and containing most of the film within Peachtree's itself, it does again just really distill it. There's a saying in mechanical engineering, and just engineering in general, that the more pieces you have in something, the more likely something is to go wrong, because, you know, more pieces, more chances for something to break. And DREDD 2012 is the movie example of this. DREDD 2012 has far less moving pieces, and because it is simpler, it just sticks with it and gets it done. DREDD 2012 does just have less plot threads and less inherent complexity, which makes it a lot easier for the team to focus and get exactly to the, shall we say, general vibe or aura of the movie, and the general vibe and aura of Dredd himself. In 1995, Dredd's aura came pretty much entirely from the fact that we were told, oh, he's a badass, oh, he's cool, yada 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 yada, and all that crap. But in 2012, Dredd definitely more has to earn it. It's simple show don't tell. In DREDD 2012, we get the feeling that Dredd is an absolute fucking unstoppable beast because we see him being an absolute fucking unstoppable beast. And by just generally being a more consistent character, yes, achieved through restraint, Dredd maintains more of that cold authoritativeness that makes him so effective. And by only letting small parts of the more human elements of his character come out, it actually makes those moments where they do far more impactful, like in the elevator on the way down at the end of the movie. That wouldn't hit if Dredd was just being a wisecracking asshole the whole time. And effectively, it makes Carl Urban's character a far better portrayal of Dredd than Stallone's. It's because of all of these distinct choices and changes, and most importantly restraint, that DREDD 2012 ends up becoming a far better movie than its predecessor, much like the AU Falcon. Rather than shooting for the moon and exploding on first launch, DREDD 2012 goes, let's just get to orbit, and then just gets to orbit so damn well that you're just kind of left there going like, damn, that was the sickest fucking entry into orbit ever. Fuck the moon right off, I don't give a fucking shit, this is sick. Restraint when it comes to vision and execution is something that I personally have struggled a lot with as a filmmaker, and I know a lot of other people have as well. That's why the story of the Dredd movies and the AU Falcon is so important. They say this simple lesson for anyone who is ever willing to make anything. Don't try and do a million things poorly and just end up making something average. Just do one and do it well. That's how you end up making something truly great.
I am the law.